What's up, Nestors? It's the Russian dude. Thank you so much for the support you showed to me and my family in my previous video. That is absolutely insane. Number one, 100% the best community right here on YouTube. Thanks so much, guys. Now let's get back to the video. There's a very specific pattern the Kremlin follows whenever the idea of peace starts drifting too close to reality. It's almost ritualistic at this point. Every time negotiations begin to look even remotely possible, Moscow suddenly discovers a shocking provocation, an outrageous attack, a previously unheard of threat that allegedly forces Russia to reconsider its negotiating position. And well, guess what, right now, on schedule, we now have a new masterpiece of political theater. According to Russia's foreign minister, at some point even respected person, Sergey Lavrov, Ukraine supposedly launched a massive drone attack on Vladimir Putin's personal state residence in the Novgorod region. 91 long-range drones to be specific, 91, against one of the most heavily protected locations in the entire Russian Federation. And just like that, Moscow announces its negotiating stance now will change because you attacked Putin's dacha. How convenient, how perfectly timed, how absurdly predictable. Because when you strip away the drama, the numbers, the outrage, and the carefully chosen words, what remains is not a security incident, but a calculated excuse. An excuse to delay, derail, and poison any conversation about ending a war that Putin has absolutely no intention of stopping. Just like that, Ukraine is once again to blame for stalling the negotiations, according to the Russian propaganda. Let's start with the claim itself, because it deserves to be examined slowly and carefully. Russia says that on December 29th, Ukraine launched 91 long-range drones at Putin's residence in Novgorod region. Not a military base, not an airfield, not a logistical hub. No, just a presidential residence. A location surrounded by layered air defense, early warning systems, electronic warfare, and security units whose sole job is to prevent exactly this kind of scenario. And yet, according to Lavrov, almost 100 drones somehow slipped through, targeted the residence and forced Moscow to reconsider peace talks. No video footage obviously, no radar data, no wreckage, no satellite images, nothing, just words. Strong words, threatening words. Words that arrive at the moment when negotiations are quietly finally gaining the momentum behind closed doors. Now ask yourself a very simple question. If Ukraine actually possessed the ability to launch 91 long-range drones undetected into central Russia towards a personal residence of Vladimir Putin, why would it choose that target at that exact moment? What strategic purpose does that serve? Does it improve Ukraine's battlefield positions? Does it strengthen its diplomatic leverage, or does it hand the Kremlin the most valuable propaganda gift imaginable? Right on New Year presents giving time, or late Christmas gift, I guess. This narrative just victimhood and justification. The answer is obvious. This story is not about drones, it's about narrative control. It's about manufacturing a reason to freeze talks while appearing morally outraged. Because if negotiations do fail, Moscow wants the blame neatly assigned elsewhere. Putin gets dry out of water again and gets to continue his war for several more months. And the timing is not just suspicious, it's surgical. Talks are forming, channels are opening, Trump meets Zelenskyy, European diplomats start whispering about frameworks and guarantees, and suddenly Putin's dacha is under attack. The message is crystal clear here. Peace is only possible on Russia's terms, and any movement outside that framework will be met with escalation. Whether the attack happened or not almost becomes irrelevant at this point. The accusation itself is the weapon. There was only one possible and correct response Zelenskyy could have chosen, and he did exactly that. Let's talk about what Zelenskyy said in our next chapter. What makes this episode particularly revealing is how quickly Kyiv responded and how openly it called out the tactic. According to my sources, Zelenskyy released the statement literally within an hour from the original Lavrov's claim. Zelenskyy did not dance around the accusation, he did not issue vague denials or diplomatic evasions, no, he went straight to the point. According to him, the Kremlin is panicking because progress without scandal is failure for Putin. If Ukraine talks to the United States, if there is movement, if the narrative shifts from endless war to conditional peace, Moscow loses control. and losing control is the one thing Putin's regime cannot tolerate. Zelenskyy's warning is even more chilling when you read it closely, when you pay attention. He suggests that this accusation is not an end, but a beginning, a preparation, a justification. Because we have seen this movie before already. In September, for example, one of the most recent ones, Russia struck Ukrainian government buildings after creating similar excuses that Ukraine did it first. Now, by claiming an attack on Putin's residence, Moscow is creating pretext for strikes on Kyiv, possibly on state institutions, possibly on energy infrastructure, maybe and most likely, unfortunately, both. And when it happens, well, guess what? The Kremlin will say it was forced to respond. Forced by Ukrainian recklessness, forced by Western meddling, forced by lies it invented itself. And let's pause here for a second. Not because of the promotion, but because the double standards are outrageous. When Russia claims its leader's residence was targeted, negotiations are suddenly endangered. But when Russia actually launches ballistic missiles and drones at Kyiv, kills civilians, injures dozens, and knocks out electricity for entire neighborhoods, well, that's just suddenly normal warfare. No breakdown of talks, no moral outrage, no reconsideration of positions, nothing. Just another day. This is not a hypocrisy, this is doctrine. Kremlin treats its own narratives as sacred and Ukrainian lives as expendable, and it expects the world to accept that imbalance without any protest. Because apparently, unverified attack on Putin's empty dacha is much more severe than the real destruction of Ukrainian capital when the whole world is watching. I don't know. Let's, by the way, talk a little bit more about this most recent attack on Kyiv in our next chapter, because it is crucial to understand the ridiculousness of this entire situation. Just one day before Zelenskyy met Trump, Russia launched a major attack on Kyiv. Ballistic missiles, drones, hours of explosions, at least one civilian eliminated, dozens wounded, residential infrastructure damaged, electricity cut. This was not symbolic, this was not defensive. This was a message. And the message was brutally simple. We talk peace with one hand and strike civilians with the other. And yet, none of this stopped the Kremlin from accusing Ukraine of sabotage and escalation. Why? How? In fact, it even strengthened Russia's, Kremlin's position, because from Moscow's perspective, violence is the leverage. Zelenskyy himself called it exactly what it was: Russia's answer to peace efforts. Not a breakdown, not a misunderstanding, an answer. And that answer tells us everything we need to know about Putin's intentions. He does not want to negotiate an end to the war that limits his ambitions. He wants a pause that allows regrouping, pressure, and extraction of concessions. That is why every discussion revolves around Ukrainian withdrawals, NATO restrictions, army caps, and territorial recognition. Russia's vision of peace is Ukraine surrendering its future in exchange for temporary silence, and yet, despite all of this, talks continue. Ukraine does really want to end this war, there is no doubt about it. I mean, it's happening right on their territory. Why wouldn't they? Why else would they still want to talk to Putin after he just destroyed their capital? There is even speculation about a direct phone call between the presidents, maybe not after that horrible attack against Putin's empty dacha, but still. Trump even emerges from his meeting with Zelenskyy saying that they might be very close to a deal. But, I mean, close to what exactly? Well, it always remains deliberately vague and nobody's saying exactly what. Because when you look at the actual sticking points, it becomes painfully obvious how far apart the sides really are. Especially after Putin went crying to Trump about his residence being attacked, and Trump just believed everything, asking for absolutely no proof. Yes, it's very bad, he said. Did he condemn Russians for attacking Kyiv? No. Did he condemn Ukrainians for attacking Putin's dacha? Yes. Did Trump say in the past that he feels like Putin is playing him and lying to him all the time? Well, he definitely did. And yet... Let's now finally talk about territory, because that is where reality collides with rhetoric. Russia currently occupies approximately 20% of Ukraine's territory. After nearly 4 years of war, that number has barely changed, not in the last 3 years at least. Yes, Russian forces advanced in 2025 faster than in the previous 2 years, but the strategic picture remains bleak. Moscow still has not captured all of Donbass. It does not fully control Zaporozhye or Kherson. It holds fragments of other regions. And yet, it demands legal recognition of everything it ever touched. Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, Kherson, everything. All declared Russian by just Putin's napkin decree he just signed himself while writing it himself. Withdraw or lose more, he says, and the Kremlin warns that the consequences will be dire. Ukraine's position is the completely opposite. Freeze the lines, stop the fighting, no territorial concessions, and that difference alone is enough to stall talks indefinitely. Add to that the issue of security guarantees and the gap widens even further. Ukraine wants long-term enforceable protection, not verbal assurances, not memorandums, actual guarantees that prevent a repeat of 2014 or 2022. Russia meanwhile rejects foreign troops, demands neutrality and insists on limiting Ukraine's military. In other words, basically, as you can see, it wants Ukraine defenseless and obedient. Who would agree to that, right? Well, then there is NATO also, Putin's obsession. Written guarantees, constitutional bans, permanent exclusion. And meanwhile, Ukraine proposes security mechanisms that mirror NATO's Article 5 without formal membership. Totally different. Even that is controversial still. And hovering about it all is the question of money. Frozen Russian assets, reconstruction, sanctions relief, reintegration to global markets. There are even whispers about American companies entering Russia's resource sector again, as if some kind of commercial incentives could somehow wash away mass destruction. Let's not forget also the most cynical demand of them all, elections. Putin and elections, right? Putin claims Ukraine's leadership is illegitimate because elections were postponed under martial law, which, by the way, is engraved in Ukraine's constitution way before the invasion even started. Ironically, as you can see once again, the same Putin who has never held a meaningful election in decades or in entirety of his ruling, and now he suddenly becomes a guardian of democratic procedure. How ridiculous is that? Well, Kyiv's response is straightforward. You don't hold elections while cities are being bombed. But for Moscow, the accusation itself is useful. It undermines legitimacy, it creates doubt, it delays resolution. Look at them, they don't want to hold elections. Zelenskyy wants to be president forever, they say. So, where does all that leave us? With a story about 91 drones that may or may not exist, residents that may or may not have been attacked, and negotiations that may or may not have been proceeded, done. But beneath all of that, it lies a just far simpler truth. Russia does not negotiate when it feels strong. It negotiates when it needs time. And when pressure mounts, it manufactures crisis to reset the clock. The alleged attack on Putin's residence is not a turning point, it's tactic, a familiar one, designed to just shift blame, justify escalation, and remind everyone that Moscow still believes fear is the currency. Peace is not impossible, but it is not close either. Not while one side treats talks as a battlefield extension, and the other is expected to bleed quietly in the name of compromise. If there is deal someday, hopefully sooner than later, it will not emerge from theatrics and accusations. It will come only when pressure outweighs deception. And right now, the Kremlin is still betting that lies travel faster than consequences. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Thanks so much for watching. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below. Once again, thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow. We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.